Hi, graders. Oh, second graders? You're not second graders anymore. You're third graders. I cannot believe it. You did such a good job finishing your work at home. And so I wanted to finish with a special story at the end of this year. So I have sent out a stem for how to use your toilet paper tubes, but I'm going to do a story that's more near and dear to Mrs. Dabrowski's heart. This is called The Marvelous Mud House. And you can tell by the cover that this picture is going to include some people from different cultures. And so one of the things in this book is going to be this family right here, this mother and son, are going to be from a place called Kenya. You may remember when Mrs. Hurd did her mission project for the girls there that you've learned about that. So I want to teach you a few words. Some will be in our story today, some will not. The great thing about this book is that at the back of it, and in many of your school books you will find this, but in books that have unusual words, they will include a section in the back with words, not only what the definitions are for those words, but also how to say them. So, asante. Asante means thank you. Habari means how are you? So, asante, habari. These are words you can practice and learn. Jumbo, I think that's when everybody should, when you probably heard jumbo, man, jumbo. People say jumbo to say hello. And then they also say karibu. Karibu means welcome. Karibu, welcome. And then kwaheri is goodbye. So we've got jumbo, hello, kwaheri, goodbye. Then we have words, these will be used in the story for sure. One is chapati. Now chapati is a flat round bread, almost like a tortilla that we would eat. So if you eat flour tortillas or corn tortillas, it's going to be a bread that's flat like that. And then mandazi is a Kenyan donut. Now I would have to look that up of how they make donuts in Kenya, but just know that it's similar to a donut that we would have. And then ugali. Ugali is a dough-like porridge that's made from maize flour. Maize is corn. So you kind of like, maybe like a little bit of wet cornbread. So that's kind of interesting. So I'm going to start our story, and I hope that you're going to love this story as much as Mrs. Dabrowski does. On the edge of a lush mountain in Kenya sat a marvelous mud house where George and his mother lived. Now what made this mud house marvelous was the marvelous thing that happened there. Each morning as the sun flooded the great rift valley below, George would search the terraced garden for corn, mangoes, and potatoes while his Mama George, would milk the goat. Then they would load up their baskets on their backs and make their long walk to the village. So if you heard me, you heard correctly. They're going to load these on their backs. They're going to carry all this into the village. And I think you probably figure out they're going to be selling those items. Down, down, down one side of the mountain and up, up, up the side of the next mountain. They walked, and every day Mama George sang, we're rich, my son, rich in love, strength and life, the giver of these hears every cry. Lift up our hands to the God who provides. One morning, George could hear the children from the schoolhouse. Mama, he said, all my friends are in school. Oh, I want to go too, but how will we pay the fees? Mama George raised her eyes and replied, let's keep working, George. God will provide. So George really wants to go to school, but he and his mom have to have the money that he needs. And so look on their backs. Remember I told you on their backs? They're carrying what they can carry into the village. Meanwhile, far, far on the edge of the Oklahoma woods. Now, Kenya is not in the United States. That's in Africa. Okay, but here we're learning about a state called Oklahoma, and there's this big, look at the difference, a big house, a big front yard. Notice that there's toys everywhere. And so this family, they lived in a hungry ranch house. Marvelous mud house, but a hungry ranch house. This is where the Smith family lived. Now what made this house hungry was the feeling of always wanting more. The 5 Smith children, Olivia, Ruth, Thomas, Tucker, and Ben, they had toy trucks and trains, footballs and board games, pretty dolls, stuffed bears, one brown and white beagle, and one whopping big car. But cleanup time brought weeping and whines, and with closets overflowing with toys, they still begged their parents, "Oh, please buy us some more." Then one day, an adventure began. The Smith family hopped on a plane. They flew up in the sky, over the land, and across the ocean to Kenya. There they saw a new world of yawning rhinos, graceful giraffes, playing monkeys, and mischievous baboons. Now, mischievous is somebody who's always probably getting into trouble, kind of sneaky. Think about somebody who's kind of behind the scenes, sneaking around doing things. They saw boys selling bananas, girls carrying water on their heads. Okay? And there in the village market, the Smith family, they met George and his mother. Every day the Smiths would stop and they would buy corn and chat with George and Mama George. The youngest Smith, Ben, gathered up his courage and he said, "Where do you live? Is it very far?" Mama George leaned over with a smile. "We can show you. Please come to our house for dinner." So down, down, down one side of the mountain and up, up, up the side of the next mountain went the two families. As they passed the schoolhouse, Ben asked, "Is that your school, George?" His new friend shrugged. Now shrugged, third graders, sorry. Shrugged is when you kind of put your shoulders up by your neck, so it'd be like, I don't know, have you ever done that before when somebody asks you a question? Your parents would probably say, use your words, but many times we'll be like, oh, okay, so that's what shrugged means. So his new friend had shrugged and said, "I hope to go there someday, if we get the school fees." "God will provide," Mama George reminded. And as they walked, she taught the Smith family her song. Now I realize I'm not singing, so please forgive me. If you want to sing it at home and make up a tune, you can teach it to me. "We're rich, my friends, rich in love, strength, and life. The giver of these hears every cry. Let's lift up our hands to the God who provides." Soon they reached the marvelous mud house. Ben was surprised. "But George, where's your house?" Right here," George replied. "Mama George and I built it ourselves." "But George, where's your car?" "We use our feet," said George. "But George, where are your games?" "I'll show you." And he quickly showed them how much fun it was to play hide and seek among the corn and the mango trees, and to make up games with pebbles and banana leaves. So notice that George doesn't have all the things that Ben and his family do. He has a very small house, no car, and he's made God's creation be his place to play. And I hope some of you have learned to use things at home as you've been home doing school to play outside more. When it was time for dinner, both families gathered inside the marvelous mud house. Now I want to go back and look at this. Look how small that house is. And yet, that house could hold all of these people. They sat knees touching as they savored is just enjoyed with their mouth, so they're enjoying the plantain stew. Plantain is just a type of, almost like a banana, ugali, and chapatis. George passed around his sweet fried banzazis. Remember that manzazi that he made? So look at all this stuff there. You can see a little bit about the food there. And there's a lantern flickering on 9 smiling faces. And the walls rang with laughter. With full bellies, the Smith children looked around in wonder. In the mud house, to be surrounded by joy and love. Well, it was enough, much more than enough. It was more than all the accumulation of stuff. So they're learning that things are not as important. Things that we could touch, play, and use are not as important as joy and love and relationships. That night, Ben's eyes watered as he hugged Mama George goodbye. "Asante," he said, in his best Swahili accent. So I didn't do a good job. I'm not sure I know how to speak Swahili, so "Asante." And then they said thank you. The next day, as the Smiths flew back across the ocean, then thought about the marvelous mud house and how full it seemed, full of fun, laughter, friendship, full of Mama George's faith and her joyful songs, and suddenly he remembered what it felt like to be full too. Back at home, something seemed different at the Hungry Ranch house. The children, well, they rarely asked for more things at the store, and they all began to hug each other a little bit more. "We don't need so much stuff," they said. "A little is enough. Let's help George go to school instead." Olivia said, "You know what? I can babysit." Ruth said, "I'll just have a bake sale." Thomas said, "Well, I'll rake leaves." Mom and Dad said, "You know what? We're going to get a smaller car." Ben said, "I'll sell some of my toys." Now look at Tucker. We know he's going to have something to say. He said, "Well, I can stand on my head." Then he promptly showed everyone and then giggled and said, "Or I can help feed people's pets." Then they all sang, "We're rich in Christ, rich in love, strength and life. The giver of these hears every cry. Let's lift up our hands to the God who provides." Back in Kenya, George still thought about going to school. He planted more and more corn, but he and Mama George, they still did not have the money to pay the school fees. And he began to wonder if Mama was right to trust God for help. But Mama George continued to pray, "Lord, will you help us?" Then one day, Mama George received a letter from far away. She carefully opened it and read, "You taught us so much. We want to bless you. Please use this money to send George to school. Your friend, the Smiths." Mama George began to cry. Now, not tears of sadness, but of joy. And she skipped down, down, down the side of the mountain and leapt up, up, up. She leapt up, up, up the side of the next mountain, hurrying to find George. "Mama, what's wrong? Why do you run so fast?" George asked. Mama read the letter. "George, God has provided for us." She was almost crying. "I'm going to school," George squealed, and he wrapped his arms around his mother and let out a great big whoop and a holler. 2 houses that night rang with laughter and dance. One marvelous mud house on a mountain and one happy house on a ranch. That house is not hungry anymore. That house is happy. So this part of the book, if you really want to get a good book, this is an awesome book that had those words to learn. It even has some parts in the Bible and Psalms that you can read. And there's some people that have done some artwork of George's Village. There was a girl who drew some pictures of what the fields might look like and some other mud houses. And so, you can take this book and either read it as a family or order it and give it as a gift. But really, I think that you know Mrs. Dabrowski's heart by now. I know that I've gotten to spend some time with you in school and out of school, and I've enjoyed reading to you so much, and I've enjoyed learning. And I've learned from you, boys and girls. God has taught me lessons through you and through your questions and through our time together. And I pray that He's taught you as well. And I always think it's good when we read something or when we learn something that we think about, how is God in this? Now, this book is a lot easier to see God because we can understand that one family that had next to nothing, they were really focused and praying to God for everything, and another family had so much. Here in America, we all have so much, and it's hard for us to understand. And I want you to know, it's hard for Mrs. Dabrowski to even understand unless you've gone somewhere and really see what other people do not have. We can't see things the way God does. So God's way up in heaven, and He can see all of His people, and His people live everywhere. They live in Thailand, and they live in Australia, and they live in South and North America and Canada and everywhere in between. So in Kenya, we see the difference between a young family in Kenya and a family in America, and it helps us to see that one has a lot and one doesn't have much. So I want you to think about what you have. Think about how you can honor God with it. Everything we have is a gift from our Father in heaven. And whether your parents bought it or it was a gift, God ultimately is the provider. So I'm not telling you to get rid of everything that you have. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying though is take a look. Think about how you can help someone else. It doesn't have to be someone in Kenya. It could be somebody in your neighborhood. I really want you to look inside of yourselves and I want you to ask God to help you to have a heart for Him. So do some things, especially with your school being out, that would honor God with your time, your energy, and your resources. And resources are just things that you have. You know, it doesn't take a lot to make a card and leave it on a doorstep for an elderly person in your neighborhood. There's a lot of things, boys and girls, God can use you. Just like He used the boys and girls in this story to kind of talk to their family about giving things up, God can use you. So I want you to be big changers. I want you to change this world for Jesus. Okay, so go be a light. Go be a light, and I cannot wait to see you, and I can't wait to give you more than an air hug. I can't wait to give you a big squeeze and hug, give you a high five. So take care, be good, honor your parents, and above all, honor the Lord.